The Hyperion wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just another deep space cargo hauler, running supplies between the outer colonies with a crew of 12 and enough storage space to feed a small city for a year. But fate, as it often does, had other plans for the ship and its crew. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her stocky frame casting a shadow across the holographic display that showed nothing but empty space for light years around. That's why the energy signature that suddenly appeared on their scanners made her coffee brown eyes narrow with suspicion. "Mr. Wallace, what are we looking at?" she asked her sensor operator, a lanky man whose fingers never seemed to stop moving across his console. "Unknown configuration, Captain. But it's big, about twice our size. And it's bleeding radiation like a wounded animal." That was an apt description. The signature pulsed erratically, like a failing heart trying desperately to keep beating. Sarah had seen enough damaged ships in her 20 years of hauling cargo to know when something was wrong. Whatever this vessel was, it was in trouble. "Any response to hails?" she asked their communications officer, Lisa Rodriguez. "Nothing on standard frequencies." But Rodriguez paused, her dark eyebrows drawing together in concentration. "There's something else. A pattern in the radiation leakage. It's too regular to be random." "They're using their reactor leak to communicate," Sarah realized aloud. It was clever, desperate, but clever. "Can you decode it?" Rodriguez shook her head. "Not yet, but the pattern repeats every 12 seconds. Keep at it, Mr. Wallace. Take us closer, but maintain safe distance protocols. If that reactor goes critical, I don't want us anywhere near the blast radius." The Hyperion's engines hummed as Wallace adjusted their course. As they drew closer, the ship's external cameras began to pick up visual details of the mysterious vessel. Its design was like nothing Sarah had ever seen. Organic curves mixed with crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the hull like alien coral. The entire ship had a bluish-white iridescence that reminded her of abalone shells. "That's not human construction," her first officer, James Kumar, stated the obvious. "And it doesn't match any known alien designs in our database." "No," Sarah agreed, "it doesn't." She'd dealt with the merchant ships of the Centaurian Collective and even once seen a Rigelian warship up close. But this was different. This ship looked alive, or at least as if it had been grown rather than built. The radiation pattern changed suddenly, becoming more urgent. Rodriguez's console lit up with new data. "Captain, I think I've got it," Rodriguez called out. "They're using an incredibly basic mathematical sequence, like the kind we used to broadcast into space back in the 21st century. They're trying to establish common ground." Sarah nodded. It made sense. If you couldn't speak the same language, math was universal. "Send back confirmation using the same sequence. Let them know we understand." What followed was perhaps the slowest conversation in human history, as the two ships exchanged mathematical patterns that gradually became more complex, building a primitive framework for communication. It took nearly an hour before they established enough common ground to attempt actual language exchange. The first clear message they received sent a chill through the bridge crew. "Reactor containment failing. Aid requested. Peaceful contact intended." Sarah looked at her crew, seeing the mixture of excitement and apprehension on their faces. First contact scenarios were supposed to be handled by trained diplomats and xenobiologists, not cargo haulers. But there was no time to wait for official channels, not with lives at stake. "Send back," Aid offered. "Peaceful contact confirmed. Await docking instructions." The response came faster this time, as if the aliens had been hoping for exactly this answer. Along with it came technical specifications for their docking system, which, thankfully, seemed compatible with human technology, if only barely. "Captain," Kumar spoke up, "regulations state that in first contact situations, regulations also state that we're obligated to render aid to vessels in distress." Sarah cut him off. "And I'm not about to let anyone die because we were afraid to bend some rules." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. I know this isn't what any of us signed up for, but right now, there's a ship full of intelligent beings out there who need our help. Whatever they look like, whatever they are, they reached out to us using math, the universal language. They're smart enough to build ships that can travel between stars, just like us. Different, yes, but not so different that we can't help them. Sarah watched as her words sank in, saw the fear in her crew's eyes gradually replace with determination. This was why she loved her job, not for the cargo they carried, but for the people who carried it. Human ingenuity and compassion, reaching out across the stars. Mr. Wallace, begin docking procedures. Dr. Evans, prep medical for possible casualties, but maintain quarantine protocols. Engineering, I want options for helping with their reactor situation. She paused, then added with a slight smile, let's go make history. As the Hyperion maneuvered into position alongside the alien vessel, Sarah couldn't help but think that this was exactly the kind of moment humanity had been preparing for since they first looked up at the stars and dreamed. Not a dramatic battle or a grandiose diplomatic ceremony, but simply one ship helping another in the vast darkness of space. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that resonated through the hull. Whatever waited on the other side of that airlock would change human history forever. Sarah just hoped they were ready for it. The inner airlock of the Hyperion cycled with a soft hiss. Sarah Chen stood at the front of her small delegation, consisting of Dr. Evans and Chief Engineer Torres. All three wore sealed environmental suits, standard protocol for unknown biohazards. The outer airlock door slid open, revealing their first glimpse of the Nexari. The alien delegation consisted of three beings that seemed to defy conventional biology. Their bodies were vaguely humanoid but composed of what appeared to be translucent crystalline structures that pulsed with internal bioluminescence. Each Nexari stood nearly 7 feet tall, their forms rippling with patterns of light that shifted with their movements. The central figure stepped forward, raising what Sarah assumed was an arm in greeting. Its voice came through their suit's external speakers, having been processed through the rudimentary translation matrix they'd established during their mathematical exchanges. Gratitude/urgency, the translation rendered. We are Nexari. I am first light through storm, speaker for this vessel. Sarah nodded, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Hyperion. We're here to help. The crystalline being's internal lights flickered in what might have been relief. Reactor containment failing. Time limited. Must show/explain quickly. Torres stepped forward, her engineer's eyes already analyzing the alien architecture around them. Can you show us your engine room? We need to see the reactor setup to know how we can help. The Nexari lights pulsed faster. Follow. Careful. Ship. Damaged in ways beyond physical. As they moved through the alien vessel's corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The ship's design was organic, almost alive, with walls that seemed to breathe and pulse with the same bioluminescence as its crew. But there were dark patches everywhere, areas where the crystalline surfaces had turned black and lifeless. This damage, Dr. Evans spoke up, her medical training evident in her analytical tone. It's spreading like an infection. First Light's translation came through. Yes/correct. Not just reactor. Whole ship. Dying. We carry great burden/danger. Must not reach others. They entered what had to be the engine room, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The reactor core was unlike anything she'd ever seen. A massive crystalline structure that seemed to be growing from the floor and ceiling simultaneously, meeting in the middle in a complex lattice of light and energy. But large sections of it were dark, dead, like the patches they'd seen throughout the ship. Torres. Sarah prompted. The engineer was already scanning with her handheld devices. It's incredible, Captain. The reactor isn't just machinery. It's alive, or at least partly organic. These crystalline structures are some kind of living technology. The radiation leak isn't just a mechanical failure. The reactor is literally dying. First light moved to a control interface, its lights dimming. Must show truth. Reason for damage. Humans must understand danger. The alien activated something, and a holographic display filled the center of the room. It showed another ship. No, many ships, all of Nexari design but larger, more aggressive in their construction. The image shifted to show these ships attacking a crystalline structure that dwarfed them all. Some kind of space station or colony. Separatists, First Light explained, seek to evolve/change beyond natural way. Created weapon. Nanoplague. Destroys living crystal. Destroys. Us. This ship infected during escape, carrying warning to greater Nexari. But failed. Systems failing too quickly. Sarah felt her blood run cold as she understood the implications. This wasn't just a damaged ship. It was a plague ship, carrying a weaponized nanovirus that could potentially destroy an entire civilization. Why tell us this? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Why risk exposing humans to this threat? First Light's lights pulsed slowly, sadly. Because humans must decide. Help us contain plague. Prevent spread to Nexari space. Or let ship die here. Take knowledge of weapon to save others. Choice must be yours. Trust must be earned. Torres spoke up, her voice tight with concern. Captain, if this nanoplague is specifically targeted at their crystalline biology, we might be able to work with it safely. Human technology is fundamentally different. We could potentially help us rebuild reactor. First Light finished. Use human technology to contain plague, but risk is great. If fail, plague could adapt, could threaten all crystal-based life in galaxy. Sarah looked around the dying engine room, at the patches of darkness spreading like cancer through the living ship. She thought about the regulations, the protocols, the countless reasons to walk away from this situation. Then she thought about what humanity stood for, or at least what she believed it should stand for. Dr. Evans, what's your medical opinion on containment? The doctor had been quietly scanning throughout the conversation. Their biology is so different from ours that the current form of the nanoplague shouldn't affect us. But they're right. If it mutates, if it adapts to attack other forms of crystalline structures, the potential damage to silicon-based life forms throughout the galaxy would be catastrophic. Sarah nodded, her decision crystallizing like the very beings who stood before her. Then we help, not just for the Nexari, but for every species that could be threatened by this weapon. Torres, start working on a containment solution. Evans, I want you studying everything you can about this nanoplague. We need to understand it to fight it. She turned to First Light, whose luminescence had brightened slightly. You trusted us with this knowledge. Now we're trusting you, that this isn't a trap or a trick. Let's prove that both our species made the right choice. The Nexari's lights pulsed in what she was beginning to recognize as their version of agreement. Trust given/received. Work begins. Time short. But hope. Hope now exists. The next 12 hours aboard the Hyperion were a blur of activity. Chief Engineer Torres had converted the cargo bay into a makeshift laboratory, working alongside 3 Nexari engineers whose names translated roughly to Deep Current, Crystal Song, and Midnight Gleam. Their combined expertise was focused on a single goal, containing the nanoplague before it could spread further. Sarah stood at the observation window, watching the team's work. The contrast between human and Nexari technology was striking. Where humans relied on precision tools and digital interfaces, the Nexari manipulated their crystalline technology through direct resonance with their own bodies, their internal lights synchronizing with the systems they worked on. Captain, Rodriguez called from her station. Long-range sensors are picking up something. Multiple signatures, approaching fast. Sarah's stomach tightened. Separatists. No. First Light's lights pulsed with agitation as they entered the cargo bay. Worse. Nexari Defense Fleet. They must have detected plague signature. Coming to sterilize infection. Sterilize. Sarah's voice was sharp. You mean destroy both ships. Protocol absolute. No exceptions. Plague must not spread. First Light's crystalline form dimmed noticeably. Did not expect them to find us so quickly. Must have had scouts watching borders. Sarah turned to Rodriguez. How many ships? 5 capital ships, ma'am. Based on their energy signatures, they're significantly larger than the separatist vessels we saw in the hologram. Torres looked up from her work, her face streaked with sweat despite the cargo bay's climate control. Captain, we're making progress. The human-made containment system is working. We've managed to isolate a small sample of the nano-plague for study, but we need more time to develop a full-scale solution. How much time? At least 6 hours to fabricate and test a prototype. Maybe another 4 to scale it up. Sarah checked the sensor readings. The defense fleet will be here in 3 hours. First Light moved to the containment chamber, their lights reflecting off the crystalline sample inside. They will not listen to explanation. Protocol designed before first contact with humans. No provision for outside assistance. Then we make them listen, Sarah said firmly. Show them what we've accomplished. Surely they'd rather have a cure than just destroy the evidence. Dangerous assumption. Crystal Song spoke for the first time, their lights pulsing in complex patterns. Separatists began with similar logic. Believed they could control plague, use it as weapon. Led to this. Sarah paced the cargo bay, her mind racing. The Hyperion was a cargo ship. They had no weapons, no defensive capabilities beyond basic shields. They couldn't fight, couldn't run fast enough to escape, and apparently couldn't negotiate. Then she noticed something in the sensor readings. These energy signatures from the defense fleet, they're using the same crystalline technology as your ship, aren't they? First Light's lights pulsed affirmative. All Nexari technology based on living crystal. Why? Because that's their weakness, Sarah said, a plan forming in her mind. Torres, you said our containment system works by generating a specific electromagnetic frequency that disrupts the nanoplague's ability to communicate with itself. Right. Yes, but Torres' eyes widened as she caught on. Captain, if we modify the frequency to target their ship's systems instead of the plague, we could disable them without causing permanent damage, Sarah finished. Give ourselves the time we need to complete the cure. The Nexari engineers' lights pulsed rapidly as they communicated among themselves. Finally, Deep Current spoke. Possible, but requires perfect calibration. Wrong frequency could trigger plague mutation instead of system disruption. Then we'll get it right, Sarah said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Because we're out of options. Torres, how quickly can you modify our cargo bay's electromagnetic shielding to project the disruption field? With Nexari help to calculate the exact frequencies. Maybe 2 hours. But Captain, this is incredibly risky. If we make even a small mistake, if we do nothing, we all die anyway, Sarah pointed out. And this plague continues to be a threat to crystal-based life forms throughout the galaxy. She turned to First Light. This is your technology, your people coming to kill us. I won't proceed without your agreement. Do we try this? The Nexari's lights dimmed for a long moment before pulsing with renewed brightness. Humans continue to surprise. Logic sound, if dangerous, will help calibrate frequencies. Crystal Song has deepest knowledge of resonance patterns. Sarah nodded and activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. We have incoming Nexari vessels, with orders to destroy both ships to contain the plague. We have 2 hours to turn our cargo bay into a weapon that will disable their ships without harming their crews. I need everyone's help. Whether you're an engineer, a doctor, or a cargo handler, report to Chief Torres for assignments. This is what humanity does best. We improvise, we adapt, and we find solutions where others see only problems. Let's show the galaxy what we can do. As her crew scrambled to their tasks, Sarah caught First Light studying her with their crystalline sensors. Question, the alien said. Why risk so much for species not your own? Sarah thought about it for a moment. Because out here in space, We're all one wrong decision away from extinction. The only way any of us survive is by helping each other. Whether we're made of flesh or crystal, we all share the same stars. First Light's lights pulsed in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as their version of approval. Perhaps this is why humans have survived despite biological fragility. You adapt through cooperation rather than force. Let's hope that's enough, Sarah said, watching the sensor display as the defense fleet drew steadily closer. Because we're about to put that theory to the test. The modified cargo bay of the Hyperion thrummed with power. Crystalline structures interfaced with human technology in ways that defied conventional engineering. Torres and the Nexari engineers had worked miracles in the past 2 hours, but Sarah knew they were about to attempt something that had never been done before. Defense fleet entering weapons range in 10 minutes, Rodriguez reported from her jury-rigged console in the cargo bay. They'd relocated key bridge functions here to maintain better coordination with the engineering team. Status of the containment field modifications? Sarah asked, watching Torres make final adjustments to their hybrid system. Ready as it'll ever be, Torres replied, her hands moving across both human and Nexari interfaces. Crystal Song's calculations are solid, but we've never projected a field this large before. The power requirements alone will drain our reserves in approximately 6 minutes. Kumar finished, monitoring the power distribution. We'll have emergency systems only after that. First Light moved to the central control matrix, their crystalline form pulsing with complex patterns. Incoming transmission from Defense Fleet. Sarah nodded. Put them through. The cargo bay's main display lit up with an image of another Nexari, this one larger and more elaborately structured than First Light. Its internal lights pulsed in aggressive patterns that the translation matrix rendered as unauthorized vessels. You harbor infection. Prepare for sterilization. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Hyperion. Sarah responded, standing tall. We are not your enemy. We have developed a potential cure for the nanoplague. Request time to demonstrate. Impossible. Plague cannot be cured. Only contained through complete destruction. The Nexari commander's lights pulsed with what seemed like disdain. Human presence irrelevant. Stand down or be destroyed with infected vessel. Sarah looked at First Light, who pulsed quietly. As expected, they cannot deviate from protocol. Weapons range in 5 minutes, Rodriguez updated. Sarah took a deep breath. All hands, this is it. Torres, begin power-up sequence for the containment field. Dr. Evans, stand by with the plague samples. We'll need to prove the cure works the moment we have their attention. The Hyperion's engines groaned as they diverted every spare bit of power to the modified cargo bay systems. The crystalline interfaces began to glow with increasing intensity, resonating with the Nexari engineers who had synchronized themselves with the hybrid technology. Defense Fleet launching fighter escorts, Rodriguez called out. They're moving to surround us. Stay calm, Sarah ordered, though her own heart was racing. Let them get closer. The field will be more effective if they're within optimal range. The next few minutes were tense as they watched the Nexari ships move into position. Sarah could see their weapon ports opening, charging with the same crystalline energy that powered their ships. They're powering up main weapons, Kumar reported. 30 seconds to firing range. Sarah looked at Torres. Now or never, Chief. Torres nodded and began the activation sequence, her fingers dancing across the controls as Crystal Song and the other Nexari engineers pulsed in sync with the system. The cargo bay filled with a harmonic resonance that made Sarah's teeth vibrate. Field extending, Torres called out. Power draw at maximum. 3 minutes of projection time remaining. On the main display, they could see the effect rippling out from the Hyperion in waves of electromagnetic energy, carefully tuned to interact with Nexari crystalline technology. The first wave hit the fighter escorts, and their lights flickered briefly before stabilizing. It's not working, Kumar said, tension evident in his voice. Wait for it, Torres responded, making minute adjustments. Crystal Song, Increase resonance pattern alpha 7. The Nexeri engineers' form blazed with light as they complied, and the harmonic tone shifted slightly. Suddenly, the fighter escorts began to drift, their engines sputtering as the carefully calibrated field disrupted their systems. Main fleet entering optimal range, Rodriguez reported. They're charging weapons. The defense fleet's capital ships loomed large in their display, their crystalline weapons gathering power for a devastating strike. Sarah held her breath as the containment field reached them, praying that Taurus and the Nexeri engineers had calculated correctly. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the massive ships began to lose power. Their weapon ports dimmed, their engines sputtered, and their communications went dark. It worked, Taurus exclaimed, though her hands never stopped moving across the controls. Their primary systems are offline, secondary systems failing. Power reserves at critical levels, Kumar warned. 2 minutes of projection remaining. Sarah stepped forward and opened a channel to the defense fleet. This is Captain Chen. As you can see, we could have disabled your ships permanently. Instead, we chose a temporary measure. We're not your enemies. We're trying to help. Your ships will regain power in approximately 10 minutes. In that time, I suggest you watch this. She nodded to Dr. Evans, who activated the containment chamber's display. Inside, samples of the nanoplague were visible, their destructive patterns clearly observable as they attacked a piece of Nexeri crystal. Then, Evans activated their hybrid containment field, and the plague particles went inert. This is not just a demonstration, Sarah continued. This is a cure. We combined human electromagnetic technology with Nexeri crystalline resonance to create a way to neutralize the plague without destroying infected ships or killing their crews. We did this in less than a day because we worked together, trusted each other, and refused to accept that destruction was the only answer. First Light stepped forward, their lights pulsing with formal dignity. I am First Light through Storm, original bearer of plague warning. These humans speak truth. They have done what our own scientists claimed impossible. They have found third path between surrender and destruction. Power reserves at 30 seconds, Kumar reported quietly. Sarah held her breath as she waited for a response from the defense fleet. Their ships hung silent in space, temporarily powerless but not for much longer. Everything depended on whether they could convince them to listen, rather than attack the moment they regained control. The seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness as their containment field began to flicker, their power reserves nearly exhausted. Just as the field was about to fail completely, a response came through from the defense fleet commander. Its lights pulsed in a pattern that the translation matrix took several seconds to process. Perhaps we have much to learn from humans. The next few hours aboard the Hyperion were a flurry of activity, but of a very different kind than before. The cargo bay had been transformed into a joint human Nexeri research center, with crews from both the defense fleet and the original infected vessel working alongside the Hyperion's team to implement the cure on a larger scale. Sarah watched from her makeshift command post as Taurus and Crystal Song supervised the installation of the hybrid containment technology on the first defense fleet vessel. The Nexeri had proven remarkably adaptable once they moved past their initial protocols, their crystalline technology integrating with human systems in ways that exceeded even Taurus' optimistic predictions. Remarkable, the defense fleet commander, whose name translated as Starheart, observed. Their crystalline form towered over Sarah, pulsing with thoughtful patterns. In all our centuries of space travel, we never considered that our greatest advancement would come from cooperation with a carbon-based species. Sometimes the best solutions come from combining different perspectives, Sarah replied, watching as human engineers worked alongside Nexeri technicians. Your crystalline technology is incredible, but our experience with electromagnetic fields gave us a different way to approach the problem. Yes, Starheart pulsed. We became so focused on the purity of crystal-based solutions that we forgot the universe is built on diversity. They turned their sensors towards Sarah. The separatists who created this plague sought to evolve our species through force. Instead, you have shown us a natural path to evolution through cooperation. First Light approached, their lights noticeably brighter now that treatment had begun on their infected vessel. Defense Fleet reports successful implementation on 2 capital ships. Cure protocol functioning at 98% efficiency. Better than we hoped. Torres called out from her workstation. The Nexari crystalline resonance amplifies the electromagnetic containment field far more effectively than our simulations predicted. At this rate, we can have the entire Defense Fleet and First Light's vessel treated within 24 hours. Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to the larger implications. What about the separatists? They're still out there, and they still have the original plague weapon. Starheart's lights pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as grim determination. Previously, our only option was to destroy any infected vessels we encountered. Now with this cure, we can save our people while hunting down the source of the plague. Not alone, Sarah said firmly. The separatists created this weapon by isolating themselves, believing they could force evolution through separation. We've proven that real progress comes through connection. This shouldn't be just a Nexari mission. First Light moved closer, their lights synchronizing briefly with Starheart's in what seemed like agreement. Suggest formal alliance between humans and Nexari. More than that, Sarah said, warming to the idea. A joint task force. Your knowledge of crystal technology and separatist tactics combined with human adaptability and problem solving. We could also develop new technologies together. This hybrid system we've created is just the beginning. Starheart was silent for a long moment, their lights cycling through complex patterns as they considered the proposal. Finally, they pulsed decisively. Unprecedented. But then, much about this day has been unprecedented. We'll recommend alliance to Nexari High Council. Your ship, your crew, has proven worthy of trust. Captain, Rodriguez called out suddenly from her station. We're picking up long-range transmissions, multiple Nexari vessels responding to the Defense Fleet's updates about the cure. They're requesting permission to rendezvous with us. Sarah looked at the sensor display showing dozens of new signatures appearing at the edge of their range. More ships coming to be treated. Not just that, First Light's lights pulsed with what seemed like excitement. News spreading through Nexari space. Ships coming to witness cooperation between species. To learn from humans. Torres looked up from her work, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. Good thing we're a cargo ship, Captain. Looks like we'll be carrying a lot more than supplies on this run. Sarah laughed. Well, the Hyperion may not be anything special, but her crew. She looked around at her people working seamlessly alongside their new crystalline allies. Her crew has proven they can handle anything the universe throws at them. Starheart's lights pulsed in a pattern that the translation matrix interpreted as amusement. Perhaps this is why your vessel was perfect for this encounter. You are, how do humans say it, a fat man. A what? Sarah asked, confused. In human history, Starheart explained, we read that a fat man was an unexpected weapon that changed the course of a great conflict. Your cargo vessel, unremarkable but carrying great potential, has changed the course of our species' development. Sarah shook her head, smiling. I think you mean, we're a dark horse, an unexpected contender. But either way, I'll take it as a compliment. As more Nexari ships appeared on their sensors, Sarah thought about how this had all started. A simple cargo run turned into first contact, a plague cure, and now potentially a lasting alliance between species. The Hyperion might not have been anything special, but as she watched her crew working side by side with their crystalline counterparts, she knew they had helped write a new chapter in both human and Nexari history. Sometimes the biggest changes come not from grand battleships or diplomatic vessels, but from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The Hyperion and her crew had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons, but in their ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to see possibilities where others saw only problems. First light, Sarah called out, "Let's make sure all these incoming ships know they're welcome. After all," she grinned, "we're going to need a lot of help to change the galaxy." The next series lights pulsed with warm agreement as the cargo bay continued to hum with the combined efforts of two very different species working together to forge a better future. The fat man had indeed struck again, but this time, instead of destruction, it had brought creation, cooperation, and hope.